beer.
That's why I did the dance.
Okay, this meeting is called to order. And may I say happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody here. Would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Studebaker,
Here.
Councillor Manns,
Here.
Councillor Kohlhoff,
Here.
O'Neill,
Here.
Wynn,
Here.
Lamont,
Here.
and Wendland.
Here. Would you please stand and join me in the flag salute?
Here. The States of America and to the republic for which it stands, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Jackie.
Anytime.
Okay, the first thing on our agenda is citizen comment. We have Michael Murray, who is here to talk to us. Come on forward, Michael.
With liberty and justice for all.
Is on? Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Get it.
so.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. All right.
Bring it forward.
Yeah, bring it. Yeah. There we go. Hello? Okay. Perfect. Well, good afternoon. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Michael Murray, and I'm the founder of Hunger Fighters Oregon, a 501c3 nonprofit food pantry here in Lake Oswego. The food pantry, for those of you who don't know, is open to all Lake Oswego residents, all families of LOSD students, and all families of LOSD employees. The pantry offers many items to those who visit, including canned foods, fresh produce, cooking staples, hygiene items, diapers, pet foods, and so on. During this coronavirus crisis, over 500 food insecure LOSD students have not had access to school meals that they depend on regularly from the school district. Additionally, as we see with the economy getting worse and worse and restrictions going into place, untold numbers of laid off residents will no longer have access to an income for themselves or their families. And as a result, we've seen that the food pantry has played an increasing role in assisting residents and families during this time of uncertainty. Over this past weekend, the first weekend we've really seen this in full swing, we distributed an estimated 3,800 pounds of food, or the equivalent of 3,000 meals. We served 3 times the number of clients that we usually serve on a weekend, with 45% of those individuals coming to the pantry being children. 64% of the clients we served this past weekend were first-time clients, so it does show you how the circumstances have forced people to seek other means for themselves. Over the past 3 days, Hunger Fighters Oregon has benefited from a massive outpouring of support from the community. Residents have donated money online, dropped off food at the pantry, and volunteered to help sort food or assist clients. While this incredible support has bolstered our efforts for sure, we are keenly aware that this crisis and this influx of clients may persist for several more weeks. Tonight, the council will be discussing granting Hunger Fighters Oregon an emergency grant of $5,000. The council will also be discussing granting the food pantry's municipal grant request of $5,000 early, ultimately totaling $10,000 of support from the city. These funds will be used to provide hundreds of Lake Oswego residents and families with much needed food, and I strongly urge the council to approve these 2 funding mechanisms. I would like to thank Council President Manns for spearheading this effort, especially on such short notice, and I would also like to thank the entire council for lending support to the food pantry during this time of crisis. Thank you. And I can answer any questions if there are any.
Let me say something. I'm on the municipal grant program, and we did, in fact, vote to allocate $5,000 to Hunger Fighters. In addition, Councilor Manns came up with a good idea here recently to grant them an additional $5,000. I checked with financial manager Sean, and there's no problem with that. The money is still in the municipal grant to meet that need. So I would make a motion that we grant an additional $5,000 out of the municipal grant fund for Hunger Fighters.
Second.
Discussion?
I'd like to make a comment to Mr. Murray here, and thanks for making time to come. And but I'd like to address it to my fellow councilors and Mr. Mayor. You know, I am pleased, that we have the opportunity to be able to partner with Hunger Fighters to address the insecurity that this has been further exacerbated by the COVID-19 public health emergency. I'm also encouraged that we will probably unanimously support this. However, I think we need to do more. But at the very least, we should have stayed home. As we sit in this room, to convene a business as usual agenda, we are doing a disservice to our community by diminishing the seriousness of this public health emergency we are all in. And with all due respect, with nearly everyone on the council considered a high-risk individual and gathering in a public place today and yesterday in this same room, and along with us here, we expect city staff to be here too, many of whom are also considered high risk. By having this meeting in person, in this room, I think is highly irresponsible. We could have done all of this remotely. And when I shared my concerns about having this meeting, I was dismissed as overreacting. You know, my plan was to call in today. However, I felt that this message needed to be delivered in person. And as I'm sure you're all aware, school children and college campuses are closed to try to curb the spread of the disease. And as school districts grapple with how to protect their students, faculty, and staff, and as parents struggle to figure out how to take care of their kids, and for those fortunate enough to have jobs, work from home. Businesses, large and small, are taking steps to stop the spread at a very extreme level. In fact, beginning today, all restaurants and bars on the entire West Coast have been ordered to close down their dining rooms, with enormous financial impact on the people that depend on those paychecks. And as Mr. Murray had mentioned, there will be untold numbers of people that will depend on the food assistance that we're going to provide today. And so as we move on to this agenda, let's keep in mind, is this so important today in this room that we have to have it in this room and ignore the recommendations that we impose on our students, our parents, employees, and business owners? And given the uncertainty of the future items that we are going to be discussing on the agenda today, please consider that we are making decisions about the future that are while we are under a national state of emergency. So, sorry for my long diatribe here, but I cannot stress how important this is, and I think as a city, we have done a disservice by continuing as business as usual. And I hope that there will be some further discussion about what we can be doing to address this issue. And I thank you, Michael, for stepping up and helping us, helping this council, helping the leadership here address one of these issues that will be of many that will be coming out of this public health emergency.
Okay, thanks for sharing your views. We've got a motion made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, thank you, Michael.
Thank you to all of you. Thank you.
Thanks, and thanks for your great work.
Thank you.
Next time.
Thank you, Michael.
Mr. Ormsby?
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, and remote attendees. My name is Charles Ormsby, Birds Hill CPONA, northeast corner of Lake Oswego. Intersection, citizen comment, I'm here to address the issues that you're discussing under agenda item 10, LORA, the contract for the North Anchor project. I just want to remind you that people in wheelchairs need transit access and mobility access. This project could have severe impacts on the latter. Architects, engineers do a fairly good job between the curb and to a complex and through a complex of buildings and this sort of thing. Between curb sites, we got problems. A whole bunch of nomenclature has to be decided and talked about. And this project, the North Anchor project, has severe impacts on transit-dependent riders, those in wheelchairs, and pedestrians coming from Birds Hill to Lake Oswego. I expect to get through that area without having to cross Highway 43 State Street twice. I expect 40-foot buses to make that corner, as I've stated for the last 2 years at least. And I expect accommodations to be made for 60-foot articulated buses in the future. So that's what I'm here to remind you of. And also, this is a wheelchair. I pushed it. I've got pictures, and I'll be sharing them with you at a point in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next is item 5.1, which is resolution 20.07 to approve the Luscher Farm concept plan.
Thank you, Mayor. You'll recall that you had a public hearing on the Luscher Farm concept plan on March 3rd, and you tentatively decided to adopt that, although you have some written testimony that needed to be responded to and supplemental findings. Those have been drafted and are part of Resolution 20-07. So this resolution would finalize the tentative decision and adopt finding. The only change, as I understand, in the concept plan from what you view is in fact for Metro recommendation, the portion of the right-of-way at the roundabout at Stafford and Rosemont be extended to actually include the full roundabout and the approaches to it. Other than that, I believe the plan is the same as that you reviewed on March 3rd, and staff recommendations that you adopt resolution 20-07.
Questions of Mr. Powell?
I would just like to say I want to
Councilman
thank the planning department for the work on this. I know that we have to cross a lot of Ts and dot a lot of Is to do these things, and that we are long overdue to get this boundary change and to get our Luscher Farm master plan going. So I will make a motion to adopt Resolution 20-07, approving the Luscher Farm concept plan for purposes of applying to Metro for an amendment to the Portland Metro Urban Growth Boundary, PP 19-0012.
Second.
Okay, motion made and second. Discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Did we get both Councilman Kohlhoff and Councilman
I
Mann?
believe so. If there are no votes?
No.
I'm here, and that was an aye.
Okay, thank you, Councilman.
I'm here, and that was an aye also. This is Councilor Mann.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, the next item of business then is city council goals and phasing of work plans.
So I'm not going to make a lengthy presentation because I feel like you all have, these are your goals, but I do want to draw your attention to some of them. So first of all, just as a reminder, when you met in January, you set 19 council initiatives, and an initiative is a project that's going to take anywhere from 12 to 18 months to complete. You also set some tasks, but I'm not going to cover any of the tasks. 9 of the initiatives identified by the council were new items of work, 11 of them were ongoing. I just want to draw your attention to a couple of them, and there's a couple I'd like to get direction from. I'll tell you quickly which ones those are. One, the direction on the economic development strategy, just to make sure we're all square on that, because as we develop the work plan, it's clear that some of you wanted one thing and some of you wanted something different. The second is just to make sure we're on the right track on the formal training on diversity, equity, and inclusion for the council and boards and commissions. And then last but not least, the initiative related to the Lake Grove urban renewal area to make sure we're all moving ahead with the same understanding on that. I want to just quickly talk about the other 4 I identified for you as part of this packet. I think 4, maybe it was more than that. The first is the intergovernmental strategy piece. I do think that's a good body of work, but staff has correctly identified that to implement a plan, we could develop a plan, but to implement a plan, we may need to identify staffing. It doesn't necessarily mean new staffing, it just means we may have to redirect staff or reprioritizing existing work. The second is the 2 related to transportation, the pathways goal and the pedestrian and bicycle safety goal that relates to planning on Highway 43 and McVeigh Stafford. Right now, we're going to need to go look for grant money for those goals. So our progress on those will depend on our ability to land funding to actually implement those goals. And then, yeah, go ahead.
I'll wait till you're done.
And then similarly, if you want to do work beyond the bare minimum on House Bill 2001, 2003 to do community engagement, we may look for grants for that. I actually think that would be a great idea and a great example of us being able to innovate. And so we may be very, very attractive to folks who might be looking for a community that wants to model best practices on community engagement in implementing House Bill 2001 and 2003. So I think that might actually be an opportunity for us. And then last but not least, the affordable housing project would probably rely on us achieving substantial funding from outside parties, whether it's nonprofits or other governments. Oh, and I did also note for you that the Stafford areas of interest body of work, of course, depends on the willingness of our partners in Tualatin and the city of Westland to want to pursue that goal. I understand Tualatin is very anxious to move ahead, and that Westland, just the opposite, is very anxious to not move ahead on that goal. So I just want to sort of say that one really depends on others for our ability to make that successful. Okay, with that in mind,
We're going to go through them, right?
yeah, I was going to at least go through the three where I'm looking for direction, but I do want to answer the mayor's question, whatever it is about funding. Go ahead.
In the budget, we put 350,000, and we're also getting from Clackamas County, aren't we, something like $700,000?
Yeah, and my understanding is that the additional funding from the vehicle registration tax has already been assumed as part of the pavement rehabilitation project. And you will also recall that you approved a project to build a pathway along Noss Road that actually is more than $350,000. So you've essentially, for the current fiscal year, spent the amount of money you allocated for pathways. I think that's right. Erica left the room. Erica is nodding at me. I am not wrong in this case.
Okay, that must be satisfying.
It happens once a day. I just never know when it will.
Councilor Lamont, you had some questions?
Well, I've gone through all of them, and I've got questions on each one. So if we go one by one, it'll be easier on us than trying to go through them all and then come back.
If that's the council's preference.
Yeah, let's go for it.
That's fine.
Okay.
All right.
I'll start. Goal 1A, economic development. First question is, why would Parks be one of the staffers on an economic development initiative?
I think the issue, well, first of all, if tourism is a part of our economic development strategy, our parks and how we program our parks are clearly something that we have thought of as a potential tourist attraction. So you would want them engaged.
Okay.
But second of all, many of the community's signature events, like the Auto Boat Show and the Arts Festival, actually happen in the parks. And so you
Farmers
need,
markets,
yeah.
Okay. Second question is, the consultant thing, I think there was like do a light version and then do a heavy version with heavy consulting. And so I keep questioning, is there a middle version? I think there are state agencies that would help us with the info, the economic profile, as I sent you that information already. So that could be done. I don't think we need to hire a consultant to do an economic profile, because that could take a lot.
Do you want to
So-
step up? Since Scott, I asked the department heads who I expected questions to be
Yeah.
here, so.
Yeah, so the game plan, so we can get this going and not wait 2 or 3 years. So we do not much now, or we can go full bore on a consultant versus have a consultant. And if you guys need help with the management time-wise, to just get into what are the pros and cons, what are our economic engines, what are we not doing compared to others, and then give us that recommendation. Then we can worry about staffing or not staffing or helping the chamber do some of it or whatever down the road. The Oregon Employment Department has the list of economic profile that they can do for us, I think, if we just reach out and make sure they do it. They just did it for Sandy, so I wouldn't want to pay a consultant to do something that we can get for free. So is there kind of a baby step to get a strategy together?
So a lot of this is contingent on the, kind of the goals, the overarching goals, and then the performance measures that whichever body is advising you on this recommends. And the economic profile is just basic data that we should probably have on our website right now. But I agree that the county, through their business assistance agency, economic development department, could put that together for us, but then is it going to address the sectors and the strategies that are of greatest interest to the council. So I think there's a baseline level of data that we should get from our partners at the county. And then above and beyond that, it really depends on what you're targeting and the metrics that you want to use for measuring performance there.
Well, I think that's great, because I think the Oregon Employment Department and others will have these resources for us, and it's a matter of a reach out either by you or one of our assistant managers. But it's really then what are the things we should be doing as best we can with limited resources. So that's a strategy thing that will come out later. I think we should get the consultant going and have that person come back and say, here's where you're short, here's where you're long, here's how you can do better with the chamber.
So I think the data will give you the information you need to know how to set your strategy, but the consultant can't even help you develop an action plan of what your best practices ought to be until you decide essentially what the city's role in economic development should be and how deeply you want to engage in. And I've seen cities, how deeply you want to engage in things to just make land ready for development and to make sure that city operations facilitate business development versus strategies that might be much more proactive in terms of business development, or there's a range, and I think that we need to get the council talking about sort of where on that range do you want to be before we go into developing the specific actions. And that will, and I also think something of the outreach you're going to want to do, you might want to engage a consultant because you may want an independent
Well, right.
party out there
Consultant
talking about these
is fine.
topics.
We need that.
Yeah.
But my point is that we're not a city of 200,000 where we got to have staff and the whole thing. We just need to be more proactive. And the consultant can get in there and do the SWOT analysis with us, can get the input from the different groups, can tell us what is working or not working or what we're missing from other cities. Then we would have a more robust discussion, like should we go short or long? It's a chicken and egg thing.
Right, and then after you get to that point, you can decide how active you want to be as an organization, and
Right.
that will tell us how much staffing is required, whether we can do it with
I'd like
existing.
to,
Yeah, go ahead.
along those lines, I'm a little concerned. I don't want to have a lot of consulting right off the bat. It seems to me we've had no problem getting economic development here. If you look at all the construction that's been going on in both hotels and Windward and everything else. In addition, if we really want to do something like that, GPI is also available. And I confess they haven't done much for us, frankly, and I'm not sure they could. So I don't know that getting a consultant, paying a consultant a lot of amount of funding really benefits us.
Yeah, so these are all really good questions.
I guess,
and
I'm
that-
sorry, let me finish. I
Yeah.
guess what I'm asking is, what did you envision in terms of how much consulting and what was the cost, so that we have some idea what
Yeah.
It's on page 5, just so y'all.
Yeah, pages 4 and 5, and so it's really just a function of, if staff's going to manage this and facilitate and have some expert, we have plenty of experts in the community who can actually add value to this process. If it's going to be a staff-directed process, it's going to take longer. It's really just a function of workload and capacity, and we don't have an economic development person in-house, although we have people who can run a public meeting and do focus groups. The consultant would be able to accelerate the process, basically. That's the trade-off. By being a project manager, doing the logistics, pulling together the stakeholders. And again, it really depends on what your focus is. If the overarching goal is we just want to have greater visibility, we want to have data, we want to make it known that we're open for business. And we're doing a lot of that already, but it could use some structure and some focus. And that's really the main outcome from this process would say, what is our focus? Is it business retention and expansion? Or is it recruitment? We haven't been doing, I highly doubt that. Or is there more of a visitor accommodation, hospitality focus? That's what I think a consultant would help us kind of flesh out a little bit so that we know how our time can best be spent.
We know, too, that many of the types of employers that we've had traditionally are, how do I say this the right way, are looking at places that are different in terms of how they look and feel than an office park on Cruise Way. And so I also think we have a pretty significant interest in trying to figure out what can we do to make sure that that continues to be essentially a cool place to operate a business, so that we don't lose those businesses that are operating out of those business parks. So I think there also is sort of an urban development flavor to this. I do think Scott's statement, though, is correct. It just all depends on how fast you want this done. If you want it done in the next 12 months, we probably are going to need some consulting expertise to get
Councilor
started.
Quinn, you have a question?
I would just suggest that we have a work session on this because I think it's too,
Okay.
There's a lot of details.
there's a lot of, I think we need to
That
have
is actually the first step, I think, in the work plan.
yeah, a robust discussion with the city council and Director Siegel and different members, and actually get maybe feedback from other entities.
Right.
Okay. Is that
Is that sufficient?
answer your
Yeah,
question?
if that's going to help us shape it, because I don't want a big thing either. We want to just see what we could be doing better. So if we can work it first
Yeah.
and then get it out there and someone can neutrally, objectively say to us, hey, you guys can do this or this better, and here's how you do it with the resources.
And the tentative work plan on page 6 of this packet identifies a milestone where we would anticipate a study session early to midsummer, depending.
I say early, which we originally thought was May, and now
But now
might be a little bit
everything's-
later.
later. Yeah.
Might be a little later.
Okay, you had another question, Councilor Moore.
North Anchor, who's our owner's rep for North Anchor?
Well, how about if I ask you to hold the North Anchor questions for your LORA meeting? You're going to, all will be revealed on North Anchor.
Okay, next question, goal 2A on diversity, equity, and inclusion
Yeah.
training. Now, I thought we were waiting for the task force, which is goal 2B, to come up with recommendations, but now we're talking about training right out of the box, so I'm confused.
So you set goals to do both. At your goal-setting session, you said you want to implement the recommendations of the task force, but also in advance of that, you want to make sure everyone has baseline training on what we mean as a council and a city organization when we say diversity, equity, and inclusion. Our vision of this work plan is that it's not enough just to train the council and the executive team, but we need boards and commission members all to be on the same page. So that's what we've planned, because you actually did set 2 separate initiatives.
And just feedback on 2B then, on the, including the different boards and commissions and whatever. I've been with a nonprofit and trying to schedule these things before, and it seems like it's almost impossible to get everybody in one room at one time.
Right.
I would suggest almost having, everybody has to attend, and if it's 2 sessions or whatever,
Right.
they can pick, if it's session 1, session 2, just so they can get the thing in.
I think
So-
that's the vision, is that we're going to set up 3 or 4 sessions and then basically invite boards and commission members to attend any of
Right.
the ones that they can get to.
Right.
But that's so everyone has essentially the same language, the same approach to these questions going forward.
Right, good.
Okay. Next one was 2C, the calendar of cultural events. Councilor Wynn brought this up. I thought it was a great idea. What I didn't quite get, and I think we may need to discuss either through the task force or ourselves, was I thought we were trying to kind of put in one place existing cultural events like the multicultural reading thing for the kids
Yeah.
and not go for new events yet. But this was actually asking for staff and dollars to create new events. I'm not sure if there's only 1 or 2 in the community or there's 20. We should find that out first. So where are we going with that one?
I think we expect that we're going to find pretty quickly that there are actually places in the calendar where we should be doing recognition of a significant cultural event, and we're not. I'll give you my favorite example. We don't do anything to recognize or commemorate Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. And it seems like a pretty obvious, glaring sort of absence if we're really attempting to be culturally relevant as an organization. So we do expect that there are probably a couple places where we should be actually doing something more proactive as a community, just because culturally sensitive and relevant agencies do that. So I think there's probably a hybrid.
Yeah, so the question time-wise for us, or a commitment is, should we get all the stuff on one page and then come up with new ideas and then price it, or are you trying to just jump right in on the pricing and the consultant thing, or?
I don't think we're expecting a consultant to
Oh,
do
wait,
this
maybe I'm-
work.
No, I think
Other than
there's-
maybe a little work to figure out what are our major cultural groups so that we are identifying events that are culturally relevant. We're also trying to not make this diversity by event, if that makes any sense. I've
Right.
worked in those organizations where it was going through the motions. We really want it to be tied to the
Right.
people who live here in Lake Oswego.
All right, next one is the trees, goal 3B, trees. I thought planning department came up with a list of trees that are able to be planted in the city already. Isn't that done?
I believe that they did, but I also believe that you got some citizen input, and at the tree summit, there was discussion about whether those were the correct species or not.
But Director Siegel, correct me if I'm wrong, I thought that was the second round of cleaning up that list since, maybe the third, since I've been on the planning commission. Do we need more work on that simple list of native trees?
This is looking forward probably decades for climate change and resiliency. So that list that we updated, it's fine for today. It's appropriate for our needs today. It's just, I think the SAB and the task force that was looking at this, they were projecting out longer range.
The second question then was protecting large trees on city property. So I'm trying to figure out what that is, because I think we're pretty good about protecting our own trees. What does that mean from a task standpoint or an initiative
I
standpoint?
think that was actually something you all came up with, so I assume that that is just more of a statement of policy priority.
Yeah, it's out of the Sustainability Climate Action Plan. That's where
All
it
right,
comes from.
okay, all right. Next one was the city hall, no questions. Council, goal 4B.
Yep.
The intergovernmental agencies. Now, that one threw me a little bit, because I think it was just, if I got it right, we were trying to up our game to go after more grants and funding and help from other agencies.
I don't think that
And-
is it.
And like, for example, the county cooperation with us on the VRF, but how much more staffing? I noticed you're talking about staffing on this, and it's like, what more do we need to do other than the appropriate department head or manager reach out to other agencies?
It depends on what you identify as a council about how proactive you want to be. I believe this came out of our experience when things like Oglo, where we felt like we didn't have an established position and we weren't necessarily firing on all cylinders in how we worked with our fellow governments. You'll have a lot of choices to make in the development of this plan of how proactive you want to be.
And this is including then, if I got you right with what you just said, then up our game in the communications world. That's part of
Probably
this.
that'll be part of it. But I've worked for jurisdictions where we did have dedicated staff who weren't any bigger than the city of Lake Oswego. It's really a policy choice for the council about whether we want to dedicate staff to pay attention to some of these issues at a higher level.
Yeah, okay, so to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's either go after funding and be cognizant of it and not say it's out there, but actually knock on doors and create applications. Or two, let's be communication sensitive and proactive to get ahead of some of these issues. Is that
There
right?
may be some things, though, where you as a council identify that you want to get something done, and it requires us getting another government to act on our behalf. For example, the work that you want to do around Highway 43 requires us to get ODOT to want to work collaboratively with us to solve that particular problem. So it might not just be money or better projects. It may be that we actually want to advance particular policies. And that's why we need to go through the planning process to figure out what it is we're talking about here.
Okay.
And I think one of the things we can do to help us on that is something Councilor Kohlhoff suggested, which is if we go to another governmental meeting to be able to inform council when we're done what happened.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. I think that's cool if we get some sort of a direction and more detailed work program for you as to how we can do it or not do it. Then I've got 4C, where are we here? 4C, midterm budgets, fine. 4D, if I got this right, it's really just the planning department's diligence every year to
Yeah.
clean things up as needed in planning commission. 5A, the try and keep treat wastewater plants. So I know we're going to get more information coming up, but, and not to get into the details now, but I was confused at the timing, and it almost sounded like we were going to go out for bid, hire somebody, say, you're now going to do the PPP, but then later we're going to be able to say, no, we're not going to do the PPP, so what are we doing? The chicken and egg threw me there.
Yeah, and Anthony's not here to answer your detailed questions, but I believe that is kind of how it's going to work. I don't believe you're going to get, and David, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is once we get some understanding with the city of Portland about going through the next phase of the bid process, you'll remember it's a 3-phase bid process.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do, and I just want to make sure we're clear for folks outside, and including us, is that it sounds like we're making these decisions. We're select a winning bidder to enter into a development agreement package, seek approval, yep, we approve it, and then seek approval of the guaranteed maximum price, and later said, well, then the project could change. And I wasn't sure if we were talking about a question about who would run it, either the staff in-house or contracting services out. Is that for a private new thing? So if private new thing is telling us, we're hearing that construction isn't going to make them any money, we would run the plant. So they're going to make money off of the rates.
So all of those elements are what you would flesh out as part of this 3-phase bid process. That's actually the I mean, I think that those of you who've been concerned about this project, that's actually one of the reasons you've been concerned is there's issues we have to work out with the city of Portland. There's issues we'd have to work out with a private firm that would build it. Then there's issues related to the ongoing operations of it. They all have to be negotiated. And so it's essentially a 3-phase negotiation process, and there's no guarantee the project moves ahead until everything's buttoned up.
Okay, so I think in the future, we're going to get this briefing. Anthony explained, he will bring numbers next time, which will make me more happy. And again, just to explain, not now, how you can do in-house operations if the private sector is running it, and then how you can select and thank everybody and put a bow on it and say you've now been the bidder, but we may cut them out later. It doesn't work, but we can go through the process with Anthony. 5B, goal 5B. The PCI, I think this one is confusing because it seems to be combining pathways with pavement. And this is where we continually find the pathways get pushed on the side And when I hear the VRF funds for the county got decided without council input, that's what we're asking, to put VRF, state funds, federal funds, any funds on the table so we can discuss how we can try and get more funds to the priority pathways and the safe routes to schools. So I think we have three things. We have pavement, quality, and pathways, then later pathways, and later safe routes to schools. We need them in one spot.
I don't think that this particular thing puts pathways at a second position. I think we are all clear we want pathways as well as paving.
Right, but now we have another goal coming up. It's the same as, Goal 7A is the same as Goal 5B, except roads are involved in 5C. So,
So this is really the policy conversation. I think Eric has come up, but I think this is the policy conversation that we would structure for you as part of this goal. Is I think that we have all of these transportation goals and not clear prioritization from the council. So we're not going to argue with any of you one way or the other. We would like to structure it so that you can talk to one another.
okay.
Because I have to say, I do believe the council was involved in the allocation of the county VRF funds to the bond, and Sean's in the back of the room.
I'm not sure. But,
I don't think that was
here's-
done, because we couldn't do that.
Well, here's the question. I think because it's diluting in a couple, three goals. If we say that we are having priorities on roads and paths, obviously priority paths, that include the safe routes to schools, so we don't have things spread out. And we acknowledge that we don't have much funding, which we do, and we have 300, I think as the mayor said, or 350,000 for pathways. And we have a robust discussion that says, here's option A, go all roads with only 300,000 a year for pathways. And here are the priority pathways, including safe routes to schools. And here's an option B and how to fund it. Different packages, different ways to take out of different funds, and maybe even an option C, I think will help us in the budget committee say we can put more or not into the pathways.
So that's what we'll do as you
Is our
work on
next
this
round.
goal. That's the
Got it.
plan for how we work on this goal.
Got it.
Thank you
Gold.
for your input, Sean. We appreciate it.
Sean,
always.
as usual, your presentation was really
It
good.
was
Okay.
exceptional.
5C, Sean, wait, hold on. Goal 5C,
Come on up,
which
Steve.
is the funding capacity of Lake Grove Urban Redevelopment Area. Okay, so first question is a small one. Did we ever run the numbers on what it would add to the urban renewal district if we got the unincorporated properties in that are going down to the west on Boone's Ferry? There's 6 or 7 different unincorporated properties.
So let me pause on this one, okay? Because I think you all, I would really like to take this one up just a slightly higher level. When you set this goal, I think you did it with some information that we could increase the bonded indebted capacity of the district by 20% without consulting.
No, not without consulting, but I think
the idea was that we didn't
we need to get this
require.
in process.
It didn't, well, I think based on my recollection of those conversations, that we thought we could do it without needing the county and the school district to sign off. And when we go look at what we created here at the city, even though state law would allow us to do that, we bound ourselves. So we said that we would, regardless of whether we could get away with, not have to consult with the jurisdictions. Thank you, David, for laughing. Not have to consult with the jurisdictions. We bound ourselves to consult with those jurisdictions. So first, I just want to check with you that given that the assumption that we had in January is not true, do you still want to proceed? Now, there are good reasons to proceed. In that, for example, later on, you've identified an affordable housing project on the staging area as a possible project that you want to go ahead with. Identifying an affordable housing project as an eligible expense in the urban renewal area might be a good thing for us to do. So see what I'm saying is that projects might work really well together.
That's not my question.
I understand. Let me finish before I get to your question, because I got to go up a little bit. But, so what I want to know is before we proceed in spending $30,000, because that's what it'll take to update the plan and to consult with the county and the district. And they may be very well in favor of it, given that we might want to build an affordable housing project. Do we want to proceed with this project at this point? Is the timing of this project important? Am I making sense?
Yes.
Okay, here's the question. Okay, before we even talk about affordable housing, it's a $36 million urban renewal district, right?
Yes.
Okay, so how much is left, if at all, in there now? Nothing, or you gave us that the other day, right?
About after phase one is all complete, about
Yeah.
$1.5 million.
Okay, so that's covering everything we need for phase one, there's still $1.5 million. How
And
much
the
is
staging
phase
area.
two, which we didn't get in the report? How much is phase two? What are we trying to accomplish? Phase two is X dollars, parking is Y dollars. What are we talking?
So we don't know, and I guess I'm reluctant to have anybody from staff give you a number, because the original urban renewal plan showed that phase one was 19 million.
Right.
And so, and phase one is not, as you might know, not 19 million.
Right.
So I'm concerned that if we start flashing numbers about what phase two actually costs in front of you, that years from now, we're gonna go back and say, I thought you said it was only $7 million, when it turned out
But
to be.
I understand from Director Cross that Director Rooney's coming in a couple of weeks or in a couple of meetings to actually explain what's left in there. Because the overall goal is to go into phase two and get phase two and parking going.
Right.
So what are we talking about here? We go through all this rigmarole with all this consultancy to get how much extra dollars out of this? Can we add the unincorporated county? Are we gonna get enough to do phase two? Are we gonna do enough to do the parking? We didn't have the information, so that's what I'm saying.
We're not gonna get enough to do phase two from a 20% increase.
So urban renewal district sits there, $1.5 million or whatever sits there. We can't do anything with it, and there's no phase two until we get some funds from somebody. Is that right? Because I'm getting people asking now
You
about
used the
phase
$1.5
two.
million to start the engineering work on phase two.
How much is the engineering work to get phase two going? Do we need to up the urban renewal district to do the engineering work?
Do we
So
really
again,
need-
I think the most important question is, we thought we could do this with a relatively low cost, that the cost of updating the plan was all we needed to do. It turns out we have more work to do because we need to consult with our other governments. However, doing that work may tie to some of your other goals. I guess I'm at the point where I don't have the detailed answers to your questions right now. What I need to know is, do you want to go ahead with it or not? Because
Well, should we go around and just ask phase
Can
two,
I ask a
yes or
question?
no?
Or
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I think this is the goal that I brought up. I think we need to look at the overall Lake Grove project, because there's phase one and phase two, and it would probably be helpful to have an update of what we've spent and what phase two projections are, and whether if we get the extra 20%,
how much of it we can
how
build.
much of it we can, and then find out if we're short, because I think the Lake Grove Business Association and everyone else is quite anxious to have the project all complete. And the longer we wait to have it complete, the more expensive it will be in the future. And it took us 20 years to figure out
Right.
how to get this done. So I think we should
So
just do
your answer is yes, we should do this project.
yeah, we should just do the project and find out where we are on everything, and then we can make an intelligent decision, I think. I was aware all along that we did have to have, I believe we had to go through the hoops of getting a consultant to do the phase two. I knew that it wasn't going to be cost zero. I didn't know how much but I believe I think we need to be proactive. We don't want to be reactive, I guess is my
I'd
point.
suggest,
I ask a question?
yes, go ahead, Councilor Coelho.
Manager Bennett, I didn't quite understand. Are you trying to say that if you do the work that you have suggested would be reasonable at this point, that actually promotes or would be part of or would be helpful to the goal about the affordable housing? Are those two things, the phase two and affordable housing, linked? Did I understand you correctly?
They could be linked, because right now the staging area is owned by LORA. And affordable housing construction is not identified in the urban renewal plan for this urban renewal area. So if you wanted to build affordable housing on the staging area, someone, perhaps the city, would have to buy the property from the Lake Oswego Redevelopment Agency, because affordable housing is not an eligible expense in this urban renewal area. So there is an opportunity for the council, the LORA board, to decide whether you want to include affordable housing in the Lake Grove Urban Renewal Plan, which would make it easier to convert the staging area to an affordable housing project.
Well, thank you for answering that question. And while I have the floor, then I am favorable to you going forward.
What
Do
are
you
we going
think,
forward
I have a
with?
question for you. Do you think the school board will like the idea of expanding the urban renewal district? Because it means less money for them. I don't know how much less, but it does mean less money for them.
I can't anticipate their reaction. I will say that right now, because of the new state funds that have been given to schools, it may be the easiest time we've ever had to have the conversation.
Okay.
I don't want to say they're going to be wildly enthusiastic, but perhaps less concerned than they might have been at other times.
And it's not they're not giving up money just for like Oswego through this urban renewal district. It goes into the state fund and gets allocated back. So it's a general fund pool. It's not a.
Don't they lose
one-for-one.
local
Well,
option levy?
The point is when you.
A little bit,
as the-
right, but.
Yeah,
but-
they lose access to any increases that would have been there, or their portion of any increase.
The state backfills.
Correct, but it's still going into the state formula and coming back.
I understand,
So
I understand.
So what is it we're doing with this one? I'm unclear. So what was spent, X, what is phase 2, Y, what is parking, and how do we make that work?
So that's what's in the current urban renewal plan. So we would have you want to explain the work that actually happens? So
Sure.
before I get too far over my skis.
Sure, no problem. So what we're proposing, if the board directs us to do so, is to address the questions of how much do we really need for phase 2 and how much do we need for parking. Right now, we do have some initial estimates that we had from back in 2012 when the plan was adopted, but certainly we feel those need to be updated. I think we can use information on the current Lake Grove roadway improvements to help do that. And that's why the engineering department will be part of that, trying to figure out, one, the question, how much do we need for the roadway phase 2 as well as parking? And then the second part of that would be, what's the best funding approach? Is there some other alternatives to using tax increment financing? Are there street funds? Are there other things? Just wanted to make sure we cover those bases. The next thing would be, and this relates to potentially adding additional projects to the Lake Grove Urban Renewal District of affordable housing. Is that something that would be of interest to the board? If that's the case, this is the time to do it. We'd have to go through a substantial amendment regardless of the amount that we want to increase the potential funding for. And that would be the time to do this. And then the last would be, what I probably think is probably the easiest thing is really defining what the process is and what the timeline is. We've done several plan amendments, and so we understand that process and what that cost would be.
And one option then would be the $1.5 million could be put towards design and engineering. We don't have to go to increase urban renewal because we're going to do it through other funds. We don't have to go through the process. We don't have to hire a consultant. We get the numbers together, and then we get going, and then soon we'll come to the affordable housing discussion. And just that scenario could be the minimalist plan, I think, right?
Yeah, we could certainly provide.
Without spending
different
$30,000 on a
options.
consultant to add another couple of million.
Okay, let's go
Well,
on.
I think
Let's-
we're just asking for you guys to come back with the information. We're not making any decisions today or
Right.
direction.
Okay, let's go on questions on goal 6.
Goal 6A and B to me look what we've been working on, and we're going to go for it and finalize that soon, and that's all good. 6C, goal 6C, the charter.
Don't we want to change the size of this pool? I'm just kidding.
The charter.
Too soon.
So the only thing I have on that one, which I want to send the flag up, when you say regulatory option, I'm trying to get to it here on my package.
And this is 6C?
6C. And we're talking about doing things to upgrade our parks approach, whether it's management, planning, or policy, not directly responding to this referendum request by one person. We're talking about if the comp plan needs changing, if the Parks 2025 needs changing, if a regulation needs changing. We're not talking about going to another petition to put a bunch of stuff on a petition. Is that right?
Let's hold off on that, Councilor Mott, because that's going to come up a little bit later. Not today, but a little bit later.
All right, that's fine. I just
We're going to have a work session on it.
I think
All right.
when you met, you'll recall when you met, that you asked as a council whether there was a non-amend the charter way to achieve the same result. So that's all this work plan reflects. Frankly, staff is in a very awkward position because we can't take a position one way or the other on this charter amendment.
And we're taking positions, but I guess I want to get across, because some people have said, why do we have to go to a petition? And I think the mayor's right. Let's workshop this, because It could be that we change the 2025 plan to say we can do better in the parks instead of forcing us to go through a petition with all that expense and craziness. So I just want to make sure that this initiative doesn't mean that's what we're doing. It's, we're
No,
going
we're gonna, as I
do
said,
better, but
as you
not better.
suggested, and as I said, we're gonna have a work
Yeah.
session on it.
6D, River Path, and 6E, Maple Street, those are straightforward. We're getting that done, that's great. We'll move it forward, we'll do the Golden Spike someday over there. 7A, I'm sorry, Goal 7A, which is the PASS, 5-year plan for pathways. It read the same as Goal 5B, as long as we're doing it collectively and doing all the assessment on both roads and paths. I'm fine with that unless someone else has a problem. 7B, Route 43 in McVeigh. I thanked some of our colleagues in West Lynn for putting us on to help get some funds for us for Route 43. I still think there might be funds in Metro to do it sooner than later instead of waiting a year, but if we can get these things front-loaded instead of waiting, that would be great. And also McVeigh Stafford, I would think a bulk of that is going to be done when we finish the traffic study for the rec and pool center. If we're going to do a traffic study for the new center, someone's going to have to go up and down Stafford and McVeigh to make sure that the impacts are accommodated. And some of that might come out of that initiative rather than spending money to do the same thing. Am I right on that? No.
I don't think so. I think, just like all development proposals, the improvements that you require as part of the Recreation and Aquatic Center will be limited to the impacts. We'll do a Dolan analysis on that, just like we would anything. And frankly, if you want to do the improvements all along Stafford McVeigh as part of the rec center project, there won't be a rec center project.
Right. No, that's not what I'm saying.
Who laughed?
A
back there?
professional traffic study is being done right now, right?
It'll be tied to the impacts of the development,
That's
not
my
of
point.
all of the traffic.
No.
Yeah.
The traffic study that's being done now through our Parks Department and through the school district on the impacts of a park and recreation and aquatic center is ongoing right now.
Yes, that's
And if they say the increase in traffic is going to do something down the road on McVeigh, that will be part of it. So are we?
Again, we'll apply a Dolan test to it.
No.
Right, is it, I don't know,
Okay.
John, what you're
Let's not
really.
get into Dolan and Nolan. The point is some work is being done on these corridors. So let's not be redundant, okay? That's all I'm saying.
Okay,
Wait a minute.
I
Go
don't
on,
think you should.
Ask his question, will you?
The
You got a question?
The question is we're out there looking for funds because we need to address these corridors comprehensively and sooner than later. So I would imagine that there'd be some work being done already by what we're paying for, the traffic study for an impact of one development. And that impact statement will also look at other things that could jump on that corridor that would affect our center. It's not raw. So if we hire somebody, I want to make sure we're not double counting on those consultants, that's all. And hopefully we'll get the money. Okay.
Go on.
Goal 8A, HB 2001 and 2003. Now, I was a little confused on whether we're starting or stopping or waiting till this comes out in December. And where are we with this as far as all this work that needs to be done with all this intensive engagement? Now, are we being pushed to do intensive community engagement by DCLCD or are we saying we need to do that? It's confusing what we're trying to sign off on here.
Councilor Lamont, City Councilors, at your prior work session, study session on HB 2001, the feedback was that we should monitor the state rulemaking process, which we're doing. We have staff who's attending some of those meetings, and when the state comes out with their draft model code and direction for what the city, what the expectations are for the city, then we would report to the council, and we're targeting that in July. Of course, it's subject to change with everything else that's going on. But at that point, we should have enough clarity around what the state's minimum requirements are for the middle housing that we'll have a decision point at that meeting where we can either proceed with a community process to apply the statute and come up with a zoning strategy that works for Lake Oswego, or we can wait for the model code to be finalized, which is due in December of this year. So the community process would engage at that point where you provide the direction, say we want you to go forth and begin coming up with options for the code. But we know that we would need to do that work by June 2022. And the general time frame is between July 2021 and 2022 that we would have to do that work. If that answers your question
And I
about
think
timing.
we know, based on what we've heard from our work with neighborhood associations, that there's going to be a lot of community engagement around this implementation of this bill. And so we might as well structure it and plan for it, because it's coming. So we've
So-
got,
May I ask? Oh, I'm sorry.
no, please
No,
go
go
ahead,
ahead.
Counselor.
My question to Director Siegel is, what I'm hearing from you is that you're doing the pre-work as far as staff education and starting to formulate what needs to be done once things become more solidified. Is that correct?
That's correct. We're also identifying examples of middle housing that already exist in the community. We're preparing profiles of each neighborhood so that we can have an informed discussion at the time that we're ready to engage with the community on what the code or what the state requirements mean for each neighborhood, given the framework of neighborhood plans and overlays that already exist. We're also reviewing, to the extent possible, existing CCNRs and private covenants that already restrict middle housing in some way. And we're looking at infrastructure capacities. So that's the work that we're doing now, so that when we get to a point where we're ready to engage, and you provided the direction to do that, that we have a good baseline of information, so we're working from a set of facts. So,
Counselor Mans,
Thank you. Yes.
did you have any other questions on any of these things?
No, that was it. I just wanted to make sure I had clarification. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director.
Counselor Kohlhoff, do you have any questions so far?
No, this is, and I'm hearing really well. So everybody is apparently close to the mic. So thank you so much.
Thank you. All right.
All right, goal 8B, Stafford. So I understand, and this may be a David question, the three-party agreement says the one party that wants to initiate planning must give 90-day notice to the other cities.
It's initiated.
Right. So if Tualatin wants to get a grant, like Beaverton and King City and others are getting grants to do the planning for their unincorporated, annexation areas, then Tualatin, if they're going to do it, it sounds like, I think as Manager Bennett said, they're ready to go. They're going to tell us within 90 days that they're going to do it.
Yes, I think what the city manager is talking about, that they're ready to delineate areas of interest. That's not the same thing as beginning concept planning.
Right, except-
So that the
Yep.
first step, at least contemplated in the three-party agreement, was that the parties talk about areas of interest, and then concept planning follows once you know what your area is.
And
But
we have not developed the areas of interest at this
Right.
point.
No, that's correct. And so and the three-party agreement agreed that that would happen no earlier than the year 2020.
And
We're here now.
Director Siegel, and then in the three-party agreement, there was discussion that you have to follow some of the planning laws and goals in order to do the delineation of areas of interest. So my point, though, is I'm not clear if one party, a la West Lynn, says, no, I don't want to participate that. Is that going to kill the whole effort, or are the two out of the three saying, we want to learn what's going on down there and we want to have planning? Can we move forward?
That's a good question. I think there's a commitment in good faith to work with each other under the agreement, but there's not a deadline in the three-party agreement to begin delineating areas of interest, if that's what you're saying.
All right, so one can't hold up the others.
No, what I said, there's not a deadline.
All right,
All
well,
right, so
that's something we
so,
got to follow, because if
but I
two
would
cities
think
want to do
that-
the good planning.
I'm sorry.
Let him
I'm not
finish,
following you.
John.
Yeah.
But again, I think that there is a commitment in the agreement to work in good faith with each other. So I guess I wouldn't want to here anticipate what you're talking about and what the city's reaction should be. I think the parties will work together in good faith to try to work that out. I know it sounds like more of a PR answer, but I think for now, we aren't at loggerheads with either of the cities, and should we be, we can move forward from there. And we would be talking to the council about what our remedies might be.
And I just hope that cooler heads would prevail and we would do the good planning and not let one city hold us up. That's my whole point. Next question. Goal 8C, affordable housing. If I understand, we're talking about bringing this in under the urban renewal district. There's also the chance that it can be pulled out of the urban renewal district and work with a developer, an affordable housing developer on its own. So whether the urban renewal district helps us or doing it outside the urban renewal district helps us get this going. When we say significant resources, that's just the purchase of the land. There are affordable housing developers that will purchase the land at the right price. So these tax incentives, SDC waivers, tax deferrals, CDBG funds in the county are available, so it's not all resources coming from us. So are we going to look at the two scenarios in the urban renewal district and out of the urban renewal district?
Sure, you can, and you'll do that with both plans.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that we're not pushing it on the urban renewal district if there is another alternative.
Yeah, I don't think we don't have a developer, we don't have the right zoning. We've got a lot of work to do if you want to do this. It's years from the time we start to the time we would actually have some kind of contract with a developer.
Right. But to look at both scenarios, because urban renewal district may not work.
Okay,
That's it.
anybody else have questions?
I have a comment.
Yeah, please.
Thank you. I love the formatting and the delineation of how you've got them into projects and how it's laid out. So I think this is going to be very helpful. And I guess a question then is, you're working with the mayor to get the things on the agenda as we need fit. And so we don't have to worry about this really until you bring it up at specific meetings on timetables. Is that correct?
Correct.
You'll start to see the study sessions, you'll start to see this chart, this one that Anne Marie put together, thank you, Anne Marie, that's really colorful. You'll start to see the items on this chart populate your council rollout and look ahead. And so if you do have policy level questions, like some of the things that Councilor Lamont and I had an opportunity to discuss here, don't worry, they're coming back. I will also say, as is always the case, staff actually want to get this work done as quickly as possible, and so we front load it, and there's no way we're going to get all this work done in the timeline that we've adjusted. So I pledge to you to come back and report to you how we've adjusted the timeline, because some of these things will go as we planned, and many of them will not go as we planned. So this is really a living, breathing document.
As any plan should be.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I don't need any action from you unless you want to give it to me.
Okay, next step, well, that's all information from council. Any information?
Yeah.
Councilor Mann?
I'm going to discuss for a moment the coronavirus epidemic, and this is only a statement, my opinion, and I'm going to sort of read from a semi-prepared statement. I'd really like to implore us to delay our future meetings, at least the first April meeting, if not the second meeting, to while we figure out what's going on for the health and safety of our community and our staff. I know there's logistic problems with that, but I have, and legal, and I will address that directly to city attorney. But I know that we have to do better in making sure that we're breaking the chain of this disease. I would like to state that, of course, if it's mission critical staff, that they will obviously need to continue to work. I have every confidence in our staff, in our city manager, to help us to get through these extraordinarily trying times. So if we can figure that out, that would be fabulous. I'm hoping to get the support of my fellow councilors in moving this forward for the health and safety of staff, community, and frankly, our leaders, all of us. So that is my only report today. Thank you.
Councilor Kohlhoff, did you have something you wanted to give us in the way of information?
Let me just add, I always have tons to say, but keeping it brief. If it were possible, as is the case, it looks like on a lot of other committees that they're using Zoom and other alternative mechanisms, that would be great. And to the extent that you feel safe, the staff knows what who needs to be there, and we can work it out that way, I'm more than happy to continue. I'm not there today because, I was in D.C. and 2 of the people out of the 2,000 apparently showed up as positive. So I feel fine. And I'm more than happy to have the meeting this way, especially since I can hear. I would be supportive, but I'd hate to just stop meetings if they were essential.
Okay, thank you.
So if you don't mind, let me talk a little bit about this topic, about what we have done and what we can't do yet. We have on your April 7th agenda already delayed pretty much anything that's not time critical. We have on your agenda for April 7th the award of the paving contracts for the summer season. If we delay past April 7th, we will not do paving in the summer of 2020. I'm reluctant to recommend to you that we not do paving because I frankly think that's part of what we need to do to keep the economic cycle going. We can host meetings of all of you electronically. However, we still have to, under Oregon law, provide access to the public to come watch or listen to your meeting in a public space. So if we could put you electronically and eliminate the need to have Anne Marie and David and I show up in this room and let folks in, we would do it, but we don't right now. I know the governor is being asked by members of the city and county governments to waive that rule to allow us to provide telephonic meetings or virtual meetings and then allow virtual observing of the meetings. But right now, we have to have a physical place for a meeting if you have a meeting. So right now, it's tough for us to say we should cancel April 7th. And if you go ahead with April 7th, I will still have to have this meeting room open to the public at this point. That might change tomorrow.
Thank you. I think that's clear to me. And I'm sorry, I just wanted to interject that delay might not have been the best word, but figure out another mechanism. I apologize for talking over you and interrupting. Thank you.
No, I understand what it's like when you're on the phone, so you just go for it, both of you. The other thing I will say is I believe your charter requires you to meet. And so if those of you who read what we closed last Friday, or last Thursday, what meetings we canceled all the meetings except for those that are legally required. The meetings that are legally required in the city of Lake Oswego are the council meetings. So is that correct? They can waive at least.
The charter lets the council cancel up to 3 meetings a year, only 2 of which should be consecutive. Again, it wasn't talking about national emergencies, but again, even under the ordinary course, the council could do that much.
So we're trying to be very judicious about using those 3 meetings wisely. Traditionally, you take August off.
Those now are outside of the,
Right,
didn't
we
we
changed
vote to
the
put
charter.
those outside?
I'm sorry, say again?
August.
The August meetings are outside of that
No.
3, aren't they?
No, they're inside of that 3.
That charter amendment was made to allow you to do the August meetings.
All
That's
right.
partly why that.
So you essentially have 1 meeting you can cancel.
Okay.
What's your projection then for the 2nd April? If you got contracts, we got to get going on it first.
It's April 7th is your meeting.
And then the next one, more contracts, or
No, that's a study session.
if we postpone that one?
So the way we've been operating is we're going to try to get your April 7th meeting loaded up with everything that's a business need of the agencies so that if we're still going, and I suspect we might still be going in late April, that you could cancel your study session in April. That's sort of where we've been headed.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I mean, I want to say this. I think that certainly, as you had mentioned, Attorney Powell, this is not business as usual, right? This is a national emergency. And so if we need to, I know that's what the charter says, and that's what we are legally bound to do in a normal circumstance. But I think we need to ask the question, need to act, do something, because we can't just wait for the voters to amend the charter again. We have to do something. It sounds like our neighbors are either postponing or holding their meetings online. Surely we can do that. I mean, certainly in every other part of the community, we're able to hold meetings remotely, and especially if it's going to be a light agenda item. I totally agree with you in terms of paving wise, that should be approved. I don't know that there's going to be there's not going to be that much discussion, quite frankly. If we need to be able to have the presentation, we can do that remotely. We can, each of us can
I
say
agree.
aye over the phone.
I agree. It's just, right now, we still have to have a physical location.
Right.
And so you all cannot be here, but the public might still be. And so I understand what you're after, but until we get a waiver of that part of Oregon Public Meetings Law.
Well, I understand. What I'm saying right now is that, certainly, I don't quite get, we don't get the severity of the situation here. If we were saying, say that we agree with what the president is saying right now, a 15-day plan. If we keep having these meetings, it defeats the purpose. So we have to figure something out. I think if we need to talk to the Attorney General's office down in Salem or something, we have got to get, as much as we, as people in the community are asking for all these different mechanisms, we've got to do something. Because I look at all this stuff going on here. We're basically setting ourselves up for failure. If we can't even stay apart, I know that there are things that we have to do by charter under normal circumstances. This is not a normal circumstance. I mean, looking at what the rest of the community expect to do, we expect our kids to stay at home, we expect our businesses to close, we expect people to be laid off, yet we can't figure out, well, can we make an adjustment, an emergency adjustment to the city charter or something? I mean, I just feel like, that
So your next meeting isn't for 3 weeks, 21 days from now.
Right.
We are working diligently to try to figure it out. We are working with the governor's office. There's other rules we need suspended. For example, we still have to approve all land use applications in the 120 days or 150 days, depending on the application. That's a crazy rule in the circumstances so please don't take what I'm saying or what Attorney Powell or anyone else is saying that we take this situation lightly. We're working on it every single day. And you are the only folks who are having meetings at the city of Lake Oswego right now, and you're only doing it because the charter requires you to meet.
So on that note, for April 7th, so we can get roads going, we could all not show up, get on the phone, and still keep the door open if you were.
If that is the only option available to us, that's what we'll do. I would really prefer, if you are having a virtual meeting, to have the entire meeting be virtual and not have to have the public in the building at all. And the public has been terrific. I mean, there's another rule we're asking for waiver on. There's things that you have to have a public hearing on. I'd like it if I was allowed to say it's an electronic or written public hearing only. No one can offer testimony so that you can actually really do a virtual meeting. Right now, the law is in this weird spot. And so please, we are not taking this lightly. That's why we moved a bunch of stuff off. And trust me, we understand how stressful this is for members of the community. And my heart goes out to those folks who are ill or are very worried about ill family members. But at the same time, we also have work we have to deliver, because if we don't, then
The city can't shut down.
Right.
Well, we're not
Okay.
asking the city to shut down, but in case an example, the National League of Cities, I was waiting for direction from the city saying, hey, we do not recommend you do non-essential travel. I ended up not going. I didn't go. I'm so glad I didn't go. Had I gone, can you imagine there'd be 2 of us on council that would have to self-quarantine. Actually, would have been 3 of us.
So the
and
county health department at that time, and so don't forget, the other thing that's happening is we're getting new information and new direction from the federal, state, and local authorities every single day. So at that time, the county government was actually recommending to all of us, based on the information they were getting from OHA and the CDC, that business proceed as usual. So please.
Well, that was definitely, obviously that was wrong. So now we know that some of the recommendations that we're figuring out right now is not enough. And we need to look at what Google is doing. All these companies are taking.
They're in San Francisco. I'm not going to get into the conversation.
What I'm saying is we need to be prudent. It's
Dan,
better at
you've
this
made
point.
your point. You've made your point. Clearly, you've made your point, and it's well taken. We need to be concerned. We need to do everything we can.
Yes, I agree, but look
Okay.
at I'll stop at this.
Okay.
Well, I guess the suggestion, or the reality is that we have to do April 7th to get the roads going, right? We can all show up or not show up, but a lot of us will probably be on phones. And staff can say, here's the situation, yes or no on the contracts. We pass them and any other, critical things you want us to pass that day. And we just go from there.
But I think we have how many days until?
21 days.
21 days. A lot can happen in 21 days, and I think you will advise us of what we should do and work with the mayor And I think that's the end of the discussion.
Okay. This meeting is adjourned. Let's take a 5-minute break. We'll come back as Laura. Okay. Okay, this meeting of Lake Oswego Redevelopment Agency is in session. You don't need to call a roll, do you? Okay, go ahead. We're talking now about the North Anchor project, and Mr. Sin, I think you've got some information for us.
I do. Martha, did you want to
No,
say a few
go
words?
for
No?
it,
Okay,
Sid.
well, good afternoon, Chair Studebaker, member of the board. I do want to, before I begin, I do want to introduce Sarah Zahn. She is the Director of Development of Urban Development Partners, and she's on the phone with us. And as you may have read in the staff report, the executive director is recommending that the Urban Development Partners development team be selected for the North Anchor project. And so, Sarah, can you acknowledge you're there?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for making it possible for me to join you by phone this afternoon.
Okay, perfect.
I'm happy to be here.
Great. So I've only got a few slides to go through and be open for any questions afterwards. But if you'll recall, the North Anchor property is a little over an acre, and it's on 4 different parcels north of A Avenue along First Street. In November, we issued a request for proposal. It focused on a mixed-use project anchored by a boutique hotel. And so we got some really great responses by the February deadline. We received 4 of those. And the review committee, which is comprised of LORA staff, finance staff, planning staff, as well as a member from the chamber, as well as the Tourism Advisory Council, met to discuss the proposal as well as interview the development teams. And certainly all 4 of them were very compelling. You know, there were intriguing aspects of all of them, so it was a difficult decision. I also do want to note that we also are engaging the services of Nick O'Connell of MJOC, our owner's rep on this project. He is providing some limited assistance, and he helped us review the proposals to give a impartial review of those for the review committee. He'll also be helping us through the memorandum of understanding as well as the disposition development agreement. So again, we think he's a great asset because he does bring an outside perspective outside of Lake Oswego, and more specifically, he brings a lot of the private sector perspective because he does work both for private sector as well as public sector. Currently, he's engaging with the city of Beaverton, Prosper Portland, and I believe Metro as well. So certainly he has a good depth and breadth in understanding the Metro area. So the review committee, after reviewing everything, had recommended that Urban Development Partners be chosen as the developer. The proposal was certainly very compelling. But we felt like they had a depth and breadth of experience. They also have the capability to execute the project, and we feel like that they would bring a high-quality development to Lake Oswego. I'll get into a little more detail in a couple more slides here, but I did want to touch on the 3 proposals that were submitted. First one was by BPM Development Group, and they had proposed a mixed use with a hotel and some ground floor retail space. Their approach was a little unique. The west parcel, which is over on the west side of First Street, they're proposing to develop that at this point as a surface parking lot, 48 parking spaces, and in the future potentially redevelop that property. The next proposal was from Be First Development Group, and this was a very intriguing project as well. They're proposing a mix of residential 40,000 square feet of townhomes, a boutique 60 to 80 rooms, and then office space off of State Street and B Avenue.
Mr. Sin, are they talking townhomes or condos?
They're talking condos in this case.
Okay, thank you.
And what was intriguing about this project is this north-south pedestrian access and the proposed terracing in that space, which really helps create that sense of north anchor termination and activating that ground floor area. The third proposal was from Resolute Consulting, and they are also proposing a mix of hotel rooms, multifamily, residential, and then some ground floor retail to activate the space. And what was interesting about this project in the perspective down in the bottom here, it was a nice integration of terrace spaces throughout the hotel space, so you can really get a sense of public spaces as well, and it did help to reinforce kind of the A Avenue or that First Street pedestrian access way. Ultimately, the recommendation was made for the Urban Development Group, and that team is comprised of Urban Development Partners, the Atticus Hotel, Hacker Architecture, as well as Nathan Coopright, who's the hotel architect. In this case, Urban Development Partners, they're a real estate development, investment, and property management group. They invest in their properties and as well as are invested in the community. It's not a project that they're going to build and move on. They're going to hold on to it as part of their portfolio. One of the examples of their ability to execute a project is the project to the right, which is the Grand Avenue Hotel that is currently under construction in downtown Portland. This is phase one of the project. There's a larger phase two, which is 150 or so hotel rooms. But this is scheduled to be turned over to the operator, I think, later this year. The other benefits of this group was that they also had a lot of public-private partnership experiences, and having dealt with Prosper Portland, and most recently they're working with City of Beaverton's Urban Renewal District. So they understand the public-private process in engaging the public, and we felt like that was a real positive for this group. They also had a very good funding approach where they can access up to $26 million in their own equity, and this is an equity fund that they manage. And so they had earmarked up to $26 million for this project. The balance of that would be a debt through construction debt, and that would be through a long-term partnership that they've had with First Bank, First Republic Bank, yeah. And so they've had a longstanding relationship with them. They've funded 4 other projects that this development group has worked on. The next team member is the Atticus Group. This was a very unique hotel opportunity. Right now, they operate 36 rooms, independently operated in McMinnville, the gateway to the wine country. And what the Atticus Group brings to this development is a brand, is a high standard, a boutique hotel, something that they could customize for Lake Oswego. And to us, that came through very well when we interviewed that team. And for example, their engagement in the community is just outstanding. I was able to talk with the chair of the Chamber of Commerce there, and the Atticus Group, they continue to participate in the community. So their values are community values, also trying to use local businesses, local crafts to highlight those what is local to Lake Oswego. The design group includes two different design groups. One is Hacker Architects, and they've got 30 years of experience, and they're nationally recognized. They were the ranked number 31st in the nation in Architect Magazine, and I think they bring an understanding of trying to create spaces, pedestrian scale spaces, which I think is very important to this design, being able to understand the context of the neighborhood. So I think that's one of the major things they bring to it. Nathan Cooprider, it was a hotel architect for the Atticus Hotel. What's interesting about this project, this is the Atticus Hotel in McMinnville, is that this is a new construction. A lot of times, first time I saw it, I thought it was a renovation, but this is a level of understanding and context this architect brings to this project, and it would be the same kind of level of complementary design that we would expect here in downtown Lake Oswego as well. The proposal itself includes mixed-use hotel, residential, and office. The west parcel would be the hotel. 51 rooms are proposed at this time. At the ground level, there would be dining and lounge space. There would also be over on the B Avenue side, a porte cochere with parking in the back of the property. The middle piece is the residential piece, and they're proposing 45 multifamily units there with about 4,500 square feet of retail. And then the last piece is an office component on State Street, 30,000 square feet with 3,300 square feet. And all of these properties are unique in design because it does reflect the use of that building, and also from a massing standpoint, it breaks it down as opposed to having one large continuous building that is very similar. It brings that pedestrian scale. It helps transition it into the residential area, and of course continues on the strong pedestrian connection along First Street. The design group is excited and ready and committed to this project. They are they want to participate in this community. They want to leave a legacy and something that will complement what we currently have with Millennium Park, Lakeview Village, and Windward. So if the recommendation is accepted this evening, our next steps would be working with the developer to develop a memorandum of understanding where we can identify certain points to make sure that we address in the DDA. We'd work with, come back to the board and review the draft with you, make sure we're going in the right direction. The aspiration is to have a signed DDA by the end of the year and begin the development review process, which will be the rest of this year into the first part of 2021. Hopefully break ground in fall of 2021 and have a project completion by the first quarter of 2023. So that concludes my presentation, and I was going to ask Sarah. Sarah, is there anything you wanted to add?
No, you did a really nice job, Sid, of summarizing our project and our aspirations here in the community. We're really excited to be the selected team and think we put together
You loser.
Okay. Questions?
Is that,
You're still here.
Yep, I'm still here. Sorry. I'm not sure if that was me or someone else, but I'm still here and I'm happy to take questions.
Parking on the hotel, okay? There's parking in a number of buildings, but I see in the hotel, is that surface parking that's on the first floor?
Right, there is surface parking. There's a total of, I believe, about 83 or 89 parking spaces. Is that right, Sarah?
In total, between the three projects, correct.
Right, and that is what's proposed. It's all surface grade parking. And we understand that there would be strategies that we'd have to implement. We have parking modifiers that can be applied. We also have the opportunity to contribute to maybe some parking as well, to get some public parking as part of that. There's also the opportunity to do a parking analysis to see if, in fact, Currently, our code requires one parking space per hotel room. Is that really the right number? Is it more like maybe a 0.3 or something like that? So there's the opportunity to work towards trying to get the right number.
Question?
Yeah, let me, one more. How many floors are each of these buildings? Are they all 4 stories?
Sarah, are they all 4 stories? I believe they are.
Office is 3.
I think the office is 3 because we had proposed to use a flat roof and have a slightly larger floor-to-floor. So in order to meet the height and the zoning requirements, that's a 3-story building currently.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Lamont?
Yes, so the question, and not that we're going to get into detail now, but it's a policy question, and I have a question for, I think, Director Siegel. So when we talked about revisiting our downtown parking ratios, that is underway or going to be underway with Planning Commission, is that correct?
You approved changes to the parking code that allow for tandem parking, which would be beneficial for a project like this. The modifiers already reduced the parking requirement in the downtown, and so for the hotel rooms that Sid was mentioning, the standard is 0.5 or 0.75, and the overall parking load is adjusted downward by almost a factor of a third for the area. So
I think Councilor O'Neill brought this up 2 or 3 meetings ago when we talked about this, is are we in the same kind of setting with our parking as other cities of similar size? Are we too high or too low on these ratios? If I got you right, the ratios are fine now with the modifiers, or?
yeah, we looked at the hotel ratio and we're competitive with other jurisdictions. Really the policy issue in other cities, they've either waived downtown parking altogether because they have adequate public parking and garages or on surface lots. And in prior redevelopment projects, the board has prioritized public parking as part of those projects. I think that's the opportunity that you have here.
And I think they're 100 short, I think, on what the code would require. And was that a requirement without modifiers, or is the 100 short with modifiers?
They're short with, well, the Plan A is short with modifiers. There's an alternative where they've shown an additional parking level that would be part of the negotiations, I think, that you'd want to talk about.
But before negotiation, though, we're talking about just for them to meet the code with modifiers. Does that second or the first bathtub level underneath, does that meet what we would require?
Right, so per their calculation, their requirement would be 162 parking spaces, and they're proposing 83, 89 or something to that. But there's also another whole plate of parking that they're proposing that could happen as well. It includes 72 parking spaces.
So it'd get us up to what?
Yeah, and when we look at this, we'd want to work with them to make it as lean and, efficient as possible. So the parking study option, I think, allows them to look at rideshare, to look at more efficient layout of the parking lot, to look at these alternatives, and even proposing an alternative ratio or standard for each use.
Councilor Winland.
I've got a couple questions. So were all the 4 projects that were evaluated then had the same parking issues? So we're at least looking at apples to apples in a sense, so that we're not, because after you read through the thing, they want actually some contributions from Lake Oswego to make this pure. Was everyone else in the same boat? Was that one of the indicators that you had to decide on?
Right, so 3 of the 4 did have some parking challenges. One had proposed 195 parking spaces. We were trying to figure out where exactly those 195 would fit on that site, and so.
Small little cars?
Well, I think that they had a strategy, but while parking was one of those things, I think we kind of had to look at it comprehensively, but certainly that was one of the attributes that we looked at.
Okay, so all I'm saying is that we're not, by the selection of this firm, we're not putting ourselves behind the 8 ball to have to come up with a whole bunch of money to solve the issue of parking for them to be a candidate.
Right, that others.
Is that right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the other question I had is condos versus apartments. Could you explain your rationale of why you chose which, Sarah?
Sure. So I think a couple of factors here. First, while UDP has done condos and in fact is doing some condominium development currently, it doesn't fit very well with our existing source of funds. So we raise an equity fund and have investors in that fund, and condos have not been something that our investors have prioritized as an investment mode for them. So if we were to look to do condos, we would have to go out and raise a separate fund for condos. There's quite a bit of risk around those, and while we're not opposed to looking at that as an option and would certainly be willing to talk to the city about that, we also felt that there was demand in Lake Oswego for apartments, and that we would be able to deliver a product that would be, meet a housing need that exists in the city, and deliver a high-quality product that would diversify housing stock in downtown.
Okay, because we've heard the same thing for condos of people wanting to sell their houses and downsize and move to Lake Oswego, and so there's opportunities, and I totally get where you're at with the funding sources. Yep. I just wanted to make sure that we were making the right decision for having housing to meet the needs of our residents versus just a financing decision, if that makes sense.
Sure, totally. And I think, we're not opposed to having that discussion with the city in more detail and engaging in a little bit more of a market study around that. That's something that we're open to those discussions.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor O'Neill.
When there's a moment, may I ask a question?
Councilor Mans, go ahead.
Thank you. If I'm understanding, there is a tentative plan for a rooftop restaurant. Is that correct?
Sarah, did you hear that question?
Yes. Well, in our existing plan, we do show some rooftop uses at the hotel. Yes.
Okay. Would that add additional height, or that's simply rooftop? There's no reason to go beyond that, correct?
I believe that, and I'm certainly not an architect, and zoning code is not my area of expertise, but my understanding is the way that they've proposed it is not any enclosed space, so it does not add height overall to the building. We would be able to do, the elevator would be able to get up to that floor, but we're not proposing any enclosed conditioned space, which is really what causes additional height to be added to the building.
Great. Thank you for that.
Yeah, so Councilor Mance, it looks like the rooftop plan shows lounge access for the rooftop hotel piece, and it's maybe behind the mansard roof, which is the fourth floor on that hotel piece. It's also worth noting on the office development piece is a terrace area, very similar to what we have in our newest development here.
All right, thank you.
Councilor O'Neill.
My question would be on timelines, and so Sid and Martha, if we, look like we gave some pretty gracious timelines there on our side, since we've already negotiated, an agreement before, I don't think, there's a tremendous amount of modifications, even though I know there will be some. So I guess then my question goes to Sarah, if we accelerated all these timelines by 6 months, would you be able to put shovel in the ground 6 months earlier than the original timeline? Or
well, I think
staging this out based on projects you already have, or so. Just a question.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think if you think about the timeline, kind of taking out the public process piece, if we start in April in our concept design and put a shovel in the ground in November, I would say that that's a relatively generous amount of time between start of design and start of construction. So we might be able to compress that by a month or two. But the reality is that, and we'll get into more discussions with your staff, but between our design time, design review, and a permit process, I hesitate to think that we can do that in less than 15 months from start to shovel in the ground.
Well, Mr. Siegel will tell you our last 3 very large projects we did in 9 months, so.
And that we can fast track when it's appropriate.
Well, I mean.
Well, we'd be more than happy to, talk to you about that.
Yeah, 9 to 12 months we've been hitting the target.
Great, and I think part of that just comes from an abundance of caution of not wanting to overpromise, based on, knowing that this project will go through a design review and a community process.
The current schedule that is in the proposal is very similar to the schedule that we had previously. And we vetted that through the planning department. Certainly, I think what we could do when we come back to discuss the MOU is look at what's the best case scenario to try to compress that. And we can have that as our other bookend to say, this is what we feel comfortable with some float time in there. But certainly look at compressing that.
I had a question, Mr. Mayor, if you allow me to.
Oh, yes, Councilor Wynn.
Yeah, so this question is directed to Sarah. So love the design. I think it's a beautiful project. What to ask about financing, though? I think that since this was submitted, some things have happened with the economy. Do you foresee any issues with your private equity funding that you currently have lined up and your bank? Do you think that they would be a little bit more careful about this? Would they require more scrutiny of the project? Do you foresee any of that happening?
Well, it's a good question. I think, clearly the last week or so has, there's been some severe shakeup in the U.S. economy. We are certainly keeping a really close eye on that, but I don't think it's clear yet how that's going to shake out in the lending and capital markets world. And certainly from a timeline perspective, we're at a good point in this project that, just starting now, we'll be a while before we're really out seeking debt on this property. And, the equity that comes from a fund that Urban Development Partners raises and controls. So we have discretion over where we invest those dollars. So one of the tools that we have in our proverbial toolbox when it comes to looking at the capital markets is the ability to think about how we leverage our debt, and that's a tool that we can use. So, for example, if the debt markets are getting skeptical about hospitality, just as an example, we can elect to lever down our debt. So instead of financing 60% of the hotel with debt and 40% with equity, we are currently looking at it as a 50% equity and 50% debt. And that is a much happier place for lenders to be. They feel a lot more comfortable when we are, using less leverage. And we can even take that lower as needed in order to secure that debt. I'm not suggesting that we are going to or have to do that, but it's certainly something that we can, that we have the ability to do.
The reason why, thank you, Sarah. The reason I bring up that question is that, we had similar concerns before where we went through a design process. We went down the path of getting it to a DDA. And then only at that point, we were pursuing financing, and then only finding out then that funding was going to be an issue. So
Yeah.
Would it be helpful to you if we were to say, you know, a recommendation, we're going to go forward with this recommendation to award this to you, however, in additional due diligence period, so that you can have a chance to speak with your financial partners to make sure that that they're comfortable with it, because we don't want to go down a path and then get to a part where we have to seek funding. I'd like to be thinking about this ahead of time rather than, because if we learned some lessons the last time around, we don't want to wait too far down the road before we go seek financing. And I think that it would be wise, maybe if we build in some, if fellow councilors, if you would be willing to entertain potentially an additional due diligence period, just for the fact that we are kind of in some uncertain times right now, and we want to be able to make sure that we set up this project for success and not have disappointments. Of course, nothing's guaranteed, but I think that would be wise for just allow a little bit more time. That might be just to be able to kind of feel out the capital markets and feel out the bank that might be involved.
And I would add, I think you just heard from Councilor O'Neill and Councilor Nguyen and all of us about, we're anxious to get this going. It's a beautiful project. It will really do great things for our downtown. And we lost some time on the previous proposal, so we want to make up time as best we can, but we also have to be realistic with the economy. So I think it's a partnership that just has to keep working the details and trust each other and get it going. Because the overall official technical philosophy is get her done. That's the whole philosophy. And I think we like what you've proposed. It's outstanding.
So when
Thank
you're
you.
ready, I have a question. I have a couple questions.
Go, Sarah.
No, this is Teresa.
Oh, it's Teresa. Teresa, how are you?
I'm fascinated. Councilor Nguyen just expressed something, and this is more of a statement than anything else, this first part. One of the, and I did really like this project, but I did also like BPM, the fact that they had completed $3 billion in their time. That's a lot of development expertise, and they're presently with $1 billion in Portland, Bend, and Anaheim, all with again that same high luxury type feel, which I understand is really important in order for us to also have other types of development near and dear to my heart as the affordable housing. So I support anything we can do to make certain that we have the financing as secure for both the developer's sake and our own. The second piece that I was a bit concerned about, and mind you, of the four, no one said that they would put in any affordable housing. And so no one is at a higher or lesser position in my eyes. On the other hand, you were, Sarah, the one group that through the Lentz Commons had done some affordable housing. It said it was 30% affordable. I don't know what that is. 30% affordable at what amount? 60 AMI or 80?
Yeah, that project was one that Hacker worked on as the architect. I have personally been involved in financing and developing a number of affordable housing projects myself with my prior firm.
So, and I'm not asking for a commitment right now, and it seemed to me that your group also was savvy about some of the opportunities out there, like the opportunity zones. And with all of that, if it were possible, and I'm not saying that I'm asking per se for this, but if it were possible, are you open to putting in some affordable housing if it were to be able to be reasonable for you?
Yes. Yeah, we are not at all opposed to mixed income housing, and I think that the key piece for the city and for the developer is just how that gets financially worked out. So, for example, the city of Beaverton right now is working with developers of market rate housing to include a certain percentage of units at a below market rate, affordable rate, and they are bringing some subsidy to the project in order to facilitate that. I'm more than happy to talk about some best practices around that, if that's something that's interesting to the city as part of this process.
And one third thing, and then I hand the microphone back. Whoever wrote your proposal alluded to some possible environmental problems. Was that just as a precautionary matter, or are you actually aware that there is actually a real possibility of an environmental issue there on that site?
What I understand, and I have not dived deeply into the details, is that there was some prior environmental concerns at the auto body shop on the corner, and I think the straight kind of way to look at it is if we do environmental investigation out there and find that there's remediation required, we would just want to talk to the city about how that remediation gets paid for as part of a larger discussion about the transfer of the land.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Councilman
You're
Manns,
welcome.
Councilman Manns, did you have any questions?
No, my roof question was answered, and the other questions I have been asked and answered by the other councilors. Thank you, Mayor.
Great. Okay, so now what we're going to do is to say whether or not we approve the recommendation to go with UPL.
Right, so what you're doing is you're
Affirming?
yeah, allowing us to begin negotiations of an MOU with the recommended firm.
There's a recommended motion in the agenda that we
Yes. Do you want,
So what?
can I move?
Yeah, let's do it.
Before we do that, though, I got
go
a
ahead.
question. So if we were to, the idea that floated out there is if we were to move forward with this, but how do we build in some sort of, if you're agreeable, some additional due diligence on the front end to talk about financing? Is that something that would be, fellow councilors and Mr. Mayor, if we were?
Well, I think we've already put in earnest money that's non-refundable on this thing.
Well, no, I don't want them to have, I'm not interested in keeping the earnest money from anybody, but I think it would be just a good idea for the proposer to make sure that all in, right, in terms of, before we go too far down the path, because I'm just concerned that maybe the financing piece of it may need to be adjusted, so I want to be able to have the developer make sure that if they need to ask for some additional clarification from the banks. Again, I want to make sure that we have financing as, not rock solid, but as more solid as, with the most clear information we
Can
have.
that be part of the MOU?
Right, and that's what I was just going to suggest, is in the MOU, we can include something to that effect. Certainly, one option that we had was just doing an exclusive negotiating agreement. However, we decided to go with the MOU because it does allow a little more depth and breadth to what we can negotiate up front. We want to be able to know what's the deal up front, what are going to be the major critical issues.
So
to
this
that,
is
yeah.
very, very different setup than we had with our prior person. because
Exactly,
These people have
yeah.
a fund, and they either have that $26 million in that fund or they don't. Because that's what, the bank is going to want to make sure before they finance onto this project. So that's a very, very different setup. And these funds are very common. They're very heavily sought after. Usually these funds sell out within an hour because the amount of money that a lot of these funds ask is fairly reasonable for many investors, somewhere between $250,000 and $500,000. So it's amazing how fast they sell out.
Well, let's not put words in Sarah's mouth. So, if Sarah, if you're fully, if we don't, I'm just putting it out there. If you feel like, as a developer, if you feel like that would be helpful to you, I'd say I'd offer to. But if you don't need it, then.
Yeah.
Well, ask if First Republic would write the same letter that they wrote on February 6th today. I think would probably.
They probably will.
Well, if you look at the letter, it's quite vague. So I have the same letter in my RFPs. I bank at the same places. So
I would think that while we want to move this fast and fast track, and our staff is good at telling us what we can or cannot do time-wise, there will be off-ramps in here, and we're going to have to come to conclusions sooner than later. And I like how you built in a lot of decision points instead of we go all the way down and then there's one decision point. And so is it financing solid? Is it condos or apartments? Does that change the equation? Is it the economy's so bad you can't even get people in the architecture firm to design it? I mean, we got to be careful just going down the road together as partners. I mean, it's a different day now.
So,
Okay, well-
can I make a movement?
Please.
Can I move to select Urban Development Plus Partners as the North Anchor project developer and authorize the LORA Executive Director to negotiate and present for LORA Board approval a memorandum of understanding and disposition and development agreement with UDP for the 1.07 acre North Anchor site?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion?
I mean,
No.
is it enough for us to direct the?
So what I'm thinking is actually what we'll do if you adopt this motion is we'll try to schedule relatively frequent, and right now I don't know what relatively frequent means, but executive sessions to update you on the status of the MOU so that if any of you do have concerns about how the business plan is shaping up, that you have an opportunity to get that addressed before we ask you to act in public.
Including the parking and streetscape and other things that are still.
Yeah, those will all be topics that are negotiated. So yeah, we'll want to make sure you're on the same page as we're on as we proceed. But I hear what Councilor Wynn's saying. I lived through a number of projects that were underway in 2008 and know that the worst thing that could happen is we could have a hole in the ground here. And so I think we'll try to figure out a way to make sure you stay updated and work towards identifying places where there might be.
It's very different than 2008.
Oh, I know, and it feels a lot more like 2001 to me than it did 2008.
different.
Yeah,
Banks are loaded with cash right now.
Okay,
does that work?
yes.
Well, it works for you, but I'm actually looking at Council.
Well, no, what I don't want to have happen is going down that path where the developer's so far into it that they can't say, hey, we want, Sarah, we want you to be able to tell us at any point if you feel not comfortable going for this, and we know it's not a reflection on you as the developer, but it's just the sign of the times, and
Right.
yeah, it's just something that I just feel like in previous situations we had some different, it was harder to be able to say, hey, I don't have the financing, cut me loose. So we want to be able to do that so that you don't feel like you're painted into a corner and you can't not perform.
Thank you. I really do appreciate that. And, I think Urban Development Partners' approach to these public-private partnerships is one of building trust and creating transparency.
And I would suggest sometime sooner than later, we meet the team, their whole team somehow, some way. And then also, are you going to be getting back after tonight to the others that didn't get picked to give them some feedback? And
Yes, actually, I think a couple of weeks ago, or when the staff report was published, I did reach out to him.
And to thank the extra members of the committee in addition to staff.
I will,
Thank you.
yeah.
Okay, let's take a vote on this.
The last comment I was going to say is we're very fortunate to have 4 great proposals.
Oh, absolutely.
So that, I think that was
Thank you, Sarah.
nice.
You did a great job.
Thanks, Sarah.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thrilled to work with you all.
Wait a minute, let's take a vote here. We still have to.
So you
do
know
that.
for sure.
Oh, maybe
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Colton?
Jackie Mans, aye. Aye.
Okay,
go.
motion
Unanimous.
passes. Thank you very much. Sarah, thanks
right.
again.
This is exciting.
Thank you. Looking forward to working with you all.
You bet.
Yes. Could you get the project done tomorrow?
We're ready to get started.
Good.
I look forward to it. All right, stay healthy, everyone.
Will do.
Thank you. You as well.
Is the meeting over? Did you say?
Did
He
you
hasn't
gavel?
said the magic words yet.
I said, huh?
Oh, no. We
You
didn't.
didn't.
You need
No,
a-
I guess we need to, no, we're not in executive session, we're adjourned.
No. Can you do it?
Adjourn Laura.
Oh, you're-
Oh, you're,
you are adjourned.
okay.
Jeez. Oh, he just waved to us in the back there.
We're done.